Hey everybody, welcome back to the Wolf Pit with another episode of What Are We Eating? Today we're only going to try about a handful of canned New England clam chowders. I know there's a lot more out there, but this is what I could find, and this is what we're trying today. I actually prefer Manhattan clam chowder, at least in my area. It's pretty hard to find in cans. But whether it was in a can or in a restaurant, I always thought New England clam chowder was more like a potato soup than a clam chowder. I think a more appropriate name would have been potato soup with clam flavor. So the canned clam chowders we're trying today are Campbell's Chunky New England Clam Chowder, which weighs in at 18.8 ounces and costs $2.26. And the next one is Great Value Clam Chowder Soup, which weighs in at 18.8 ounces and costs $1.54. Then we have Progresso's Rich and Hearty New England Clam Chowder, which weighs in at 18.8 ounces, which costs $2.79. And from the pictures on the can, it looks like the best so far. And then we have Campbell's, well, yes, New England Clam Chowder, which I guess is a healthier version, which weighs the less out of all four cans at 16.3 ounces, but the most expensive at $3.29. And I know right off the bat which can Uncle Roger would like the best. The Campbell's, because it has MSG. Fool yo! All the other cans, hi-ya! I didn't know that the Campbell's Well Yes had cauliflower in it, but I'm still gonna try it. For you, the people, so you don't have to. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like cauliflower, on its own. Maybe mashed potatoes, but nothing else really tastes like it should when you use cauliflower. But I have to take that back, because sometimes mashed cauliflower, if done right, can somewhat taste like mashed potatoes. Here's the nutrition facts for all four cans of clam chowder, and they're all relatively the same. And when you compare the Campbell's Well Yes New England Clam Chowder with the other three, I don't really see a health benefit of making it with cauliflower versus potatoes, especially when you compare it with the Campbell's Chunky New England Clam Chowder. So let's start off by pouring the Campbell's Chunky New England Clam Chowder in a bowl. If you remember when we did the chicken noodle soups, we strained them first, but the New England Clam Chowder is going to be too thick to strain right out of the can, so we'll strain it once it's hot. Once the clam chowder is heated through, we're going to pour it through the strainer. And this strainer was almost too small, so we'll switch to a bigger strainer on the next one. And right off the bat, the only thing I really see is a lot of potatoes. Well, maybe I do see a couple pieces of clams. Now we'll give it a couple taps to make sure it's strained pretty good. And we can't tap it too hard, or Mrs. Wolfpit will burn her beautiful fingers. And I guess if you want to call it a broth, there's all the broth. But it's more of a cream base than it is a broth. So we've tried the cream base liquid broth, whatever you want to call it, first. So we got a spoonful, and into the pie hole, and down the gullet it went. And it did have a nice savory, clammy flavor to it. And I mean clammy in a good way. Most of the time, I tend to stay away from things that taste clammy, but in this case, it was a good thing. So we put everything back into the pool and give it a good mix. And then we scooped up a heaping spoonful. And you know the drill, into the pie hole and down the gullet it went. And it was pretty good even though I didn't get any clams. The potatoes were cooked good and the flavor was good. And again, it had a good clammy flavor. Unfortunately, I tried 3 more spoonfuls before I even got a piece of clam. And there's no doubt that there's clam broth in here, but there's very little clams. Or they're minced up so fine, you don't notice them. And from a manufacturer's standpoint, I can kind of understand that, because clams can be chewy. So their intent when making this was probably for people with no teeth. Overall, I think the flavor was really good, the potatoes were cooked perfectly, and it was seasoned well, but I would prefer more clams because I have teeth. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, I would give Campbell's Chunky New England Clam Chowder a 6 out of 10. Now for the Great Value brand Clam Chowder Soup, And out of all four, this is the only one that's called soup. And I can see why. The viscosity right out of the can is much thinner than the Campbell's chunky New England clam chowder. This is more of a soup. So once our great value New England clam chowder soup was heated through, we poured it through the strainer. And even though I did switch over to a little bit bigger strainer, there's a lot less potatoes in here. And there's a whole lot more broth, cream, base, or whatever you want to call it. So once all the liquid was strained, we gave it a try. And once I put that spoonful of liquid in my mouth, I wish I hadn't. I was gonna spit it out, but I'm not a quitter. So I did what Stormy Daniels would do. I swallowed it. Bless her heart. And I made that sacrifice for you, the people, so you didn't have to. It tasted like old, dirty clams. I don't know what a dirty clam tastes like, but that's the best adjective I could think of. Honestly, the broth was disgusting, which didn't leave a whole lot of hope for the rest of the New England clam chowder soup. But we mixed everything back in the bowl anyway to give it a try. So into the old face orifice it went, and I immediately realized where the dirty flavor was coming from. It tasted like a dirty boiled potato skin. It's not like I make a habit of sitting around eating a bowl of dirty potato skins, but I think you know what I mean. I took a couple more bites trying to control my gag reflexes, and I never did once get a piece of clam. But again, there was a clam flavor, but there was also a dirty potato flavor. And I was really surprised, because Great Value brand products are usually pretty good. I'm going to give Great Value's New England clam chowder. So with all that said, I'm going to give Great Value brand's New England clam chowder soup a 2 out of 10, and that's being generous. Now let's try Progresso's Rich and Hearty New England clam chowder. Right out of the can, it had the same thickness as Campbell's chunky New England clam chowder. It thinned out a whole lot and actually became watery, as you notice how it splashed all over the place. And I actually do see some clams in here. And then we gave the liquid a stir, and it thickened up somewhat, but it was still pretty thin. So I scooped up some of the broth to give it a try. And it had a very overpowering celery flavor. Thyme usually goes good with seafood, especially in clam chowder, but there's no thyme in this, at least according to the ingredients. But there is dried celery, and I think they used way too much of it, because the celery flavor is overpowering, to the point you can barely taste the clam flavor. So we added everything back into the bowl with the hopes that it will tone down the celery flavor. Sometimes a live reaction is better than a voiceover, as well as Mrs. Wolfpit's unsolicited comments. I told you guys she abuses me. Listen to the way she talks to me.
First bite of our clam, but the soup tastes like ass.
You would know, you ass eater.
How rude of her! And I've got to say, on every bite I took of this soup, I had a piece of clam. But the overall flavor really surprises me, because I've had Progresso's Rich and Hearty New England clam chowder before, and I liked it. But the celery flavor was just overpowering, which is why I'm going to give Progresso's Rich and Hearty New England clam chowder a 5 out of 10. Now for the Campbell's Yes New England clam chowder, which is the smallest can and the most expensive can. So we should be in for a treat. Expensive things always taste better, right? Once it was heated up and we poured it through the strainer, I had to check the can to make sure we got it all out, because there wasn't a whole lot in there, besides a lot of watery broth. So we tried the watery broth first. And the first thing I tasted was cauliflower, but I also did get a little bit of a clam flavor. In the future, I don't want to have cauliflower in my clam chowder, but for the sake of this video, it wasn't too bad. So we added everything back in, gave it a mix, and got a spoonful. And I really wanted to hate this soup for the fact that it was the smallest can, it cost the most, and it also had cauliflower in it. But I took 3 bites, but I had clams in all 3 bites. I didn't necessarily enjoy the cauliflower, but I also didn't hate it. But it was lacking in clam flavor. I really wanted to hate on this soup, but I can't. I don't like the fact that it's the most expensive can and it has the least amount of product in it, but the product that's inside the can isn't too bad. So with all things considered, I'm going to give Campbell's Yes New England Clam Chowder a 4 out of 10. So I did like we normally do when we're trying the same type of product, and we added all of the clam chowders into the same bowl, gave them a mix, and heated it up. And I couldn't believe it. The Progresso Rich and Hearty New England Clam Chowder tainted the other 3 cans of New England Clam Chowder with the overpowering celery flavor. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.